These are the untold truths about Michael Jackson, the king of pop's childhood in Gary, Indiana, that shaped the legendary performer before the world ever knew his name. This is the story of how a 672-square-foot house on Jackson Street became the unlikely birthplace of musical history. 11 people crammed into a space smaller than most modern garages. The Jackson family home at 2300 Jackson Street stretched just 100 feet deep by 50 feet wide, with only 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. Joseph and Catherine Jackson bought this tiny place in 1950 for $8,500, never imagining it would become one of the most famous addresses in music history. Just look at how they slept to understand their cramped conditions. The boys shared a triple bunk bed in the only other bedroom. Tito and Jermaine on top, Marlon and Michael squeezed in the middle, Jackie alone on the bottom. The 3 girls collapsed on a convertible sofa in the living room. And when Randy arrived, he claimed a second couch. Michael once described the house by saying, "You could take 5 steps from the front door and you'd be out the back." It was really no bigger than a garage. The irony, the property didn't even have an actual garage. Gary, Indiana, in the 1950s and 60s was a steel town built by the United States Steel Corporation, part of the Great Migration era when black families moved north for industrial opportunities. The city sprang up in 1906, named after lawyer Elbert Henry Gary, the founding chairman of U.S. Steel. Joe Jackson punched the clock as a welder and crane operator at the massive Gary Works steel plant, which employed over 30,000 people in 1970. This industrial backdrop proved crucial to understanding the Jackson family's desperate drive for something better. In 1967, Gary elected Richard Hatcher as one of the first black mayors of a major American city, marking a pivotal moment in civil rights history. Joe Jackson wasn't just a steelworker. He carried musical dreams of his own. One of his few prized possessions was a guitar, strictly off-limits to his children. But in 1964, curiosity overwhelmed young Tito, who secretly played the instrument when his father worked late shifts. The day Joe discovered a broken guitar string changed everything. Instead of just punishing Tito, Joe demanded a demonstration. What he heard shocked him. His son possessed real talent. This moment ignited Joe's vision of a musical group made up of his children. In 1963, the Jackson brothers had formed with Jackie, Tito, and Jermaine. By 1965, 5-year-old Michael and Marlon had joined. And in August 1965, the group became the Jackson 5. From their tiny living room on Jackson Street, the foundation of a musical empire was taking shape. But success demanded a price that would torment Michael for the rest of his life. Joe Jackson imposed an intensive rehearsal regimen that required the brothers to practice vocals and choreography for up to 5 hours daily after school, often stretching into the evening. The children addressed him as Joseph rather than Dad, reinforcing his authority through emotional distance. Michael later revealed the dark side of these rehearsals. "I was so afraid of my father that it would cause me to vomit when I saw him. I remember my mother screaming, 'Joe, you're gonna kill him.'" The discipline was harsh and often physical. Joe himself admitted, "I never beat him. I whipped him with a stick and a belt. I never beat him. You beat someone with a stick." This distinction seemed lost on the terrified children. The family's Jehovah's Witness faith added another layer of isolation. As Jermaine wrote about their childhood Christmases, "We observed all this from inside a house with no tree, no lights, no nothing. Our tiny house was the only one without decoration. While neighbors decorated for holidays, the Jackson children watched from their windows, feeling like outsiders in their own neighborhood." Despite the harsh conditions, musical magic was brewing at 2300 Jackson Street. Michael remembered, "We were a family that sang all the time. We would take the furniture out of the living room and dance. We would have a songwriting competition while we washed the dishes." Music wasn't just their escape. It was becoming their destiny. The breakthrough struck in 1966 when the Jackson 5 won their first talent show at Theodore Roosevelt High School in Gary. By March 1967, 6-year-old Michael was making his first solo public performance at James Garnett Elementary School, singing "Climb Every Mountain" from The Sound of Music. His first-grade teacher, Anita Hill, had recognized his extraordinary talent and nurtured his early performances. The momentum accelerated quickly. In August 1967, the Jackson 5 burst straight into the finals at Harlem's legendary Apollo Theater and won. This victory on the renowned Chitlin circuit, which included venues like Chicago's Regal Theater and Detroit's Paradise Theater, established their reputation in Black American music. Gordon Keith, owner of Steeltown Records in Gary, signed them to their first contract in November 1967. Their debut single, Big Boy, dropped on January 30, 1968. But the move to Motown in 1969 transformed everything. Bobby Taylor of the Vancouvers brought the Jackson 5 to audition for Berry Gordy's legendary label. And after signing with Motown, the Jackson 5 made history by becoming the first recording act to achieve 4 consecutive #1 singles on the Billboard Hot 100. I Want You Back, ABC, The Love You Save, and I'll Be There. These hits were crafted by the corporation, Berry Gordy's elite production team featuring Deke Richards, Freddie Perrin, and Fonse Mazel. In August 1969, Joe, Michael, and the Jackson 5 relocated to Los Angeles, with the rest of the family following in December. They moved into a Mediterranean-style house at 1601 Queens Road in West Hollywood, later relocating to Encino, California. According to biographer J. Randy Tara Borelli, the living room of their new home was twice the size of their entire former house in Gary. The contrast couldn't have been starker. From sharing a bunk bed with 3 brothers to individual bedrooms, from 672 square feet to a sprawling California mansion, from Gary's steel mills to Hollywood's palm trees. But Michael would later reflect on what was lost in this transition. At the 1993 Grammy Legend Award, he said, "My childhood was taken away from me. There was no Christmas, there were no birthdays. It was not a normal childhood. Those were exchanged for hard work, struggle and pain, and eventually material and professional success. But at an awful price. I cannot recreate that part of my life." Years later, producer Quincy Jones would help Michael channel these childhood experiences into his solo masterpieces like Off the Wall and Thriller. The Gary years had shaped Michael in profound ways. He witnessed adult behavior far too young, performing in nightclubs and bars as part of the Chitlin circuit. "I grew up in nightclubs. When I was 7-8 years old, I was in nightclubs. I saw striptease girls take off all their clothes. I saw fights break out. I saw people throw up on each other. I saw adults act like pigs," he revealed in a 2002 interview. Yet Gary remained important to Michael throughout his life. His last visit to the city happened in June 2003, and even after becoming a global superstar, he never forgot his roots. Neighbor Jacqueline Davis Staton remembered how the Jackson boys would participate in her father's neighborhood baseball league, and how 1 or 2 baseballs would end up in the Jacksons' front yard. These simple childhood moments stood in stark contrast to the intense pressure they faced at home. Today, the tiny house at 2300 Jackson Street stands as a monument to an unlikely beginning. In May 2021, official highway signs were installed directing drivers to the home of the world-famous Jackson 5. The irony isn't lost that the street is named after President Andrew Jackson, not the Jackson family. Gary itself has transformed dramatically since Michael's childhood. The Gary Works that employed over 30,000 people in 1970 had only 2,246 employees by 2023. The city that built the Jacksons has struggled with economic decline, but the legacy of that cramped house on Jackson Street continues to inspire. This year, thousands of fans gathered for the 2300 Jackson Street block party, celebrating what would have been Michael's 67th birthday. Original Jackson 5 members Jackie and Marlon emerged from their childhood home to thunderous applause, proving that some stories transcend time and circumstance. In April 2026, the world will see this story brought to the big screen when the Michael biopic releases, with Michael's nephew Jafar Jackson playing the King of Pop. For the first time, a member of the Jackson family will portray Michael, bringing the story full circle. The small house in Gary, Indiana, wasn't just where Michael Jackson lived. It was where he learned that dreams could overcome the smallest circumstances, where talent could flourish despite hardship, and where the seeds of musical immortality were planted in the most unlikely soil. That's the real untold story of 2300 Jackson Street.